Thank you to today's show sponsor, Azalea Orthopedics. They are a group of highly trained physicians and surgeons in East Texas that will meet all of your orthopedic needs. To learn more about Azalea Orthopedics, go to azaleaortho.com. That is azaleaortho.com. Welcome to Getting Real to Heal with Dr. Grace. I am Dr. Grace English, founder of Deep in the Heart Ministries. We are a ministry that exists to tackle the hard realities of this life through the power of Jesus Christ. He is the only one that can set us free from our addictions, our negative thoughts and emotions, and bring us the true lasting healing and peace that He wants for our lives. Thank you for joining us for today's episode. Today's topic, we are going to be talking about healing from infidelity, finding God when your husband has been unfaithful. Unfortunately, marital infidelity is very common these days. About a quarter of marriages will experience infidelity at some point. It is one of the greatest heartaches that a spouse can feel and go through. Today, my special guest, Avara, is going to be sharing her courageous story of how she found God in the midst of her ex-husband Ron's unfaithfulness, and how God used that time to draw Avara close to His heart. Avara Mahler, she is a Bible study teacher, and she loves the Lord, and she's been pouring into women's hearts for many years. She led multiple groups of Bible studies for women at our home church, Green Acres Baptist Church. And also, Avara sat with me on the initial founding board of CARE, which is Christ-Centered Abortion Recovery and Education. And she and I, we started that nonprofit in 2011. And Avara also facilitated many Bible studies for women who needed hope and healing from their past abortion. Avara also has been involved in the class of Restory, which is a program which shows women how God has been active in their lives even before the difficult times set in. Avara Mahler, she is married to Michael Mahler for 28 years, and they have 4 sons and 8 grandchildren. Welcome to the show, Avara.
Thank you, Grace.
It's so good to have you here.
Well, thank you very much. I'm honored.
Yes. So, Avara, tell us a little bit about your family of origin. How was your childhood?
Oh, my goodness. Now, you'll have to be a little older to understand this, but I had that perfect Leave It to Beaver kind of family. Sweet, sweet mother and dad that were believers, but oddly enough, we only went to church once a year at Easter. Because they were from different denominations. And I guess maybe it happened that way back then. Mm-hmm. But it was just that Daddy was a Baptist and Mother was a Methodist, and never the twain should meet. So anyway, but Daddy made sure we watched the 10 Commandments every year on TV, and we went to church at Easter. And in between, they just exemplified what Christ is with the love and forgiveness.
So you grew up in a very secure home, full of love, and they talked about Jesus.
Yeah, well, a little bit.
bit.
My mother said never talk about politics or religion, so we talked a little bit.
Right.
Anyhow.
But through their actions, they obviously knew who Christ was.
Yes.
And how old were you when you left home?
I got married the first time when I was 17 because I was pregnant. Mm-hmm. And he was my high school boyfriend. Mother and Daddy had always said I was the joy of their life, and I took that seriously and wanted to be the joy of everybody else's life too. So anyway, I got married at 17 because I was pregnant.
Right. And how long was that marriage?
It lasted about 1.5 years.
Okay.
It was just, we were too young. It was during the early 70s. All the friends thought it should be the place they should come and do drugs if they wanted to, and that was not okay with me. And anyway, just past issues that he had not dealt with. Apparently abusive family, and that was being passed on. And I finally had to leave and get my son out.
Okay, because it was not a safe environment.
It was not a safe environment.
So you definitely did the smart thing.
Well, I thought I was smart, you know. I thought I was smart and didn't even attempt to try, but it just seemed like the best thing to do.
Right. So how long did you were you and your first son? How long did y'all, live together by yourselves?
Oh, not long. I mean, I moved back in with my parents. I had a job, and then, like the foolish 18-year-old I had become when I was working, met Ron at the job I had, and I hated having my son in daycare, and Ron offered that he would take care of me and take care of my son. And so being that I'd gotten divorced, I felt like, well, living with somebody was probably the best way to know what they were like.
Right.
And
it's the same thing that's being told today, that couples should live together to know if that person is supposed to be their lifetime partner.
Right.
Whereas the statistics show us that people who have lived together before they're married, they actually have a higher rate of divorce.
Yes, they do. And it's obvious. And it all, oddly enough, it played out almost the exact same way it did for Ron and his first wife. And it played out for me the exact same way. He found someone else, and I didn't listen or investigate.
Right. So when you and Ron first got married, y'all did have you had a second son with him.
Yes, 4 years after we were married, we had another child.
Right. So what was your marriage like in the early years to Ron? Were they pretty happy?
Oh, I thought they were wonderful. I loved getting to be a stay-at-home mom and taking care of my children and my home. His job tended to move us around a lot.
Okay.
But no, I thought it was very.
So you trusted him, and you didn't have really any reason to suspect that he was being unfaithful to you.
It wasn't, I guess, until that fourth year when I was pregnant. I suspected it, but when you ask questions, he could give perfect answers. And, other than that, my children and I were well cared for, and but we did move a lot. And so during this pregnancy, he was moved to another city, so we did a lot of communications back and forth. And
how long did y'all live together before you got married?
We lived together a year and a half.
A year and a half, okay. And then y'all decided to get married. Then you had your second son.
Yes.
And
4 years after we got married.
Right, right. And so anyways, when you had your second son, then, do you want to share with the listeners that you and Ron actually had another pregnancy?
Yes.
But he had chosen that he wasn't equipped to have another baby due to financial reasons.
Well, I don't know that exactly it was financial, Grace. It's just that he had a previous marriage, so now with this one, he now had 3 biological children and a stepchild, and I got pregnant not long after I had given birth, and he was just, and that's when I had suspected him of seeing someone else. And anyway, it was just, he wasn't going to go through that. And when I told him I was pregnant, it was over the phone, and because he was in another city, and he just said, I'm not going here. And then later, as we kept talking about it, he said, if you're going to do this, if you're going to keep this baby, then I'm going to leave and take this last one, and then you can have that one. And that was just the way it was going to be. And I guess because I had always, I thought he was a believer, and so he knew the submission verse really well. And I had vowed to God when I finally married again that I wasn't going to have another divorce. Just tears everybody up. And so anyway, finally, after I did go back and visit the doctor that delivered my son, and ask him what he thought, and he suggested that probably I should pay attention to the living children and make that decision. And so foolishly I did.
Right.
And as you know, pay a price for that. But he and I vowed we would never speak about it again, and we did not.
Okay.
We did not. And life got busy.
Right.
I had a 6-year-old and an infant, and we were moving, and
right. So you pretty much decided, that was something that was going to be in the past. It was going to be left in the past.
Right.
And
that was over.
And that, Ron, he definitely felt he gave you an ultimatum, like you either, have an abortion or we stay married.
Right.
And so, to do both. And so I know that is difficult. And, as I had mentioned earlier in the podcast, Avara had sat on the board with me of CARE, and Avara also has had a past abortion as well as I have, and we know the grief that is internalized that cannot be expressed once after somebody chooses to have an abortion. And so it really does play havoc on your mind and on your emotions and spiritually as well. And as Avara and I both have learned, most marriages don't survive an abortion because it pretty much splits apart the father and the mother in two different directions. And so, but at the time you didn't know that. And so as you were going along in your marriage, did you start attending church with your sons, or did Ron ever go to church with you? Or was church even anything in your life at that point?
When we had gotten married, right after we got married, and I had my oldest son, he was 3, and I had gone to church with a friend. And when I was there, because I had always wanted the Lord in my life. Like I say, my parents, I know, knew him, and I don't know, I think God calls you all the time, even when you're very young. And it was something I wanted, and we had talked about it. And I thought that we would have a marriage that would be in the church because he had been raised in the church. But anyway, as time has gone on, we're that upwardly mobile couple living in America, where when I had my first son, it was illegal to have an abortion. But now it was talked about all the time as, it's just like taking your birth control pill. This is easy. And so anyway, I think I justified it to myself, even though the Lord had been telling me it was wrong, but I wasn't listening. I believed in that submission. The husband is the head of the household, and now he makes these final decisions, and then as a wife, I follow. And so that's what I did.
A lot of women take that word submission out of context, or the husbands use it against the woman to force his desires and wants on you. And so little do people know, if they read the whole entire paragraph, that the sentence before is submit both of you out of reverence to Christ. And it goes on to say that husbands should love their wives as Christ loved the church and how he gave himself up for her.
Right.
And so when you have a husband who is serving and is loving you and protecting you and providing for you, it is easy to submit then to somebody of that authority, you know. But unfortunately, a lot of young women, you know, well, a lot of women have that word submission in have a wrong definition for it. And so, and that's kind of what I think Ron had used on you.
Yes.
Because you wanted to be that dutiful wife that loved and served her husband, you know?
But I was that wife who was listening more to the world, what was going on as abortion was now was legal. It had been made legal. I loved politics and, you know, all these political people that I admired that talked about the Lord. They were talking about, well, maybe this is a good thing to do this, and this is going to be rare. And what they didn't realize is that women like me, even though I believed in the Lord and thought I had as good a relationship as you could get. I mean, goodness, I tried to read all of Genesis and Exodus, and those were both great books. But by the time I got to Leviticus and Deuteronomy, girl, I was done. And we were moving so often, and I was busy with my babies, and I didn't have time.
Right.
I felt like to go to church, and he worked on Sundays. So,
right.
And submission, I only went, I thought after I accepted Christ, well, instead of going just once a year, I was going twice a year. So I was going 2 times more than I ever had when I was growing up. And it always seemed like the pastor was preaching on submission every time I showed up at the door. But then it wasn't until really after I started going through not the divorce. When I found out he was cheating on me, I began to discover that submission is out of love, and you volunteer to do that. And we all hear the Ephesians 5, but if you go to 1 Peter, you find out that, you know, it's his submission to Christ, and that's what makes me as a wife want to be submissive, because he's leading me nearer to the Lord.
Right. And so in your spirit, you knew that there wasn't something right between you and Ron. Like, he was having these other affairs, and you started realizing, wow, what were your prayers to God at that when you first found out? Was it something that you obviously, as most women, we probably are praying to the Lord, change him, you know, help him stop. Lord, save our marriage. Like, you have these cries out to the Lord to do these miraculous things. But after time and time again, you begin to see your husband in that light, thinking, you know, he doesn't want to change. He doesn't seem like he even thinks it's a problem, you know, and that this is something that you were going to have to accept, I guess, and that's why he...
I think at the very beginning, when I found out, it was, like I say, I had suspected before, but then, and in the back of your head, there are things going on that you just can't put your finger on. It's like, I think there's something wrong, but I'm not sure what it is. And when we tried to have a conversation about it, he usually told me, oh, you just have a really evil mind. Why would you think that? It must be you. But then one day, I found a lot of letters. I had gone to work. I had to go to work. He had lost his job, and I had to go to work. And I came home and found a lot of letters and things from a lot of different women.
Right.
And so when I confronted that, I was devastated. And I mean, I could have just cried a river all the time. And I would try to stay okay for the kids because by now the boys were grown. Blair was about to graduate, and the youngest was middle school. And devastation.
Yes.
Just
yes.
complete devastation.
Right. So when you did approach Ron, did he admit to them? I mean, obviously he couldn't have said anything else besides where did these letters come from?
Right. Yeah. And, you know, at first it was foolish, that he didn't mean anything. None of that mattered. It was just me and the kids. And we agreed to go to counseling, that we would try to stay together and go to counseling. And, of course, I cried all the time and had lots of questions, which he didn't. We were kind of that couple who, once things got hard, we just didn't really talk about much.
Right.
Other than that, it was good. But anyway, counseling eventually wasn't for him, and I kept going for a little while. But then I went back to a Sunday school class I had been to before. We had lived in Tyler before and moved, and now had come back. And it was a class of originally just women whose husbands taught, and only two of us' husbands didn't come with us. And then when I came back the second time, none of the women's husbands, only one of the one husband taught, and the rest of us, our husbands, didn't come. And so it was really there that as I was praying and seeking the Lord, and I kept just so many prayers. But there was one lady in this class who every Sunday she would be talking about, oh, well, I prayed about this and the Lord answered this away. And I mean, even to silly things, I thought that she prayed about what she was going to buy at the grocery store or what she was going to purchase to wear. And we would all kind of look at each other and roll our eyes and think, oh my gosh. And my thought at the time was, well, I pray, but God's not answering that. And then she started showing up in class with papers, and she would say, I was up last night, and this is what the Lord wanted me to tell you. And after she did this about 3 times, it just made me so mad at God of how can I pray to you and you answer this other woman, and then she gives me your answer. But it was amazing because all the answers were there. And finally, the 3rd time she did that, I took the papers and I shook them in her face and I said, how dare God not answer me, and you bring me these papers. And she was like, well, Avara, how do you talk to God? And I said, well, mostly I lay in bed and cry and talk to God and ask him questions about what is happening in my life. It's horrible, and I don't know why my husband has done this, and what can I do to be different. And so she taught me how to pray, and she said, Avara, if you want to hear from God, you're going to have to open this word. you're going to have to let him tell you what he wants you to know. And probably the best way to do that in the beginning is, number one, start reading Proverbs, start reading the Psalms, and then get in a Bible study. And so that's what I finally did. And oh my gosh.
Well, it's funny. Well, you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that you read Genesis, Exodus, but then Leviticus, you're like, oh, Lord, I can't handle this. I can't handle this anymore. But then you have this older, wiser lady who you were upset with her because God seemed to be talking to her and not you directly, but he was talking to you directly, in that he used this woman to point you to, this is how you hear God, is reading the Word of God, understanding who he is. He already understands everything that you are going through. It's like, Lord, help me hear you through these passages, through scripture, through, other people who know you. Because I'm sure you probably shared with, some close girlfriends what you were struggling in your marriage. Maybe not, maybe so. Well, if you didn't, then I can't imagine walking that road alone, Avara, especially when you have to have it all together in front of your boys. Like, you wanted to have that marriage. You weren't going to get divorced again.
No, I had made a vow.
Right. And so, but once you started opening the Word of God, you then begin to hear God on such a different level for the first time. And, and you were drawn to him.
Oh, exactly. Yes. What I've found about the Lord is that he knows where you are. And he wants to bring you slowly to where you have understanding of him. And he started for me it's funny because it was at the very beginning of, sorry, I have to get my glasses out, Grace. At Colossians 2, 2:2, and it says, and this was kind of my first time to do something more than maybe my Sunday school lesson. But anyway, he brought me to this, and it says, my purpose is that they may be encouraged in heart and united in love, so that they may have the full riches of complete understanding, in order that they may know the mystery of God, namely Christ, in whom are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. And then it goes on down there and it says, I'm present with you in spirit, and I delight to see how orderly you are and how firm your faith in Christ is. And, that's what. Right. And after that, in Jeremiah, he told me he had a plan for me, a plan for good and not for evil. And he also says in there that I was his everlasting love. And that's what I wanted to be, somebody's everlasting love.
I know. I mean, Jesus, he is the lover of our souls. And I think that is when you finally realize that no matter what would happen to your marriage to Ron, that God was with you. He was there even before we even acknowledge him.
Exactly.
We see his handprints all over our life, but even in those really difficult circumstances, being in a marriage where your husband is unfaithful and the trust is totally eroded, but you're having to raise these young boys and financially having to, provide for the family, that was a lot for you to take on. But once you realize God is my helper, he is at my right hand.
Yes.
I can do this because I'm not doing this alone anymore.
Right. Well, I had to have answers of how to do it. I had a high school education, so I didn't feel like I could really get ahead to take care of the boys. But I had a great job. I was in retail and later moved into management, and was surrounded by a godly family and to show me what a good marriage looked like. And this entire time, trying to keep the marriage I had together and still being somewhat submissive, and of course, and trying to talk about, well, what do you need, Ron? What do you need? Well, at that time, he thought pornography might be what he needed, and I was willing to try whatever he wanted to try. And of course, at that time, it's not like how it is on the computer now. You had to go someplace and get tapes, and we tried that. But oh my gosh, you can only imagine. I'm a woman reading the Word. I'm a woman having a relationship with the Lord, and so I felt horribly guilty. But then, and would cry and cry afterwards, which doesn't help a marriage relationship. And when, when I would tell him, I can't do this, and he would say, but we're married. We are two consenting adults just having fun together. And I began, as I would pray about that, oh, Lord, what do I say here? And I said, well, maybe we are consenting adults, but we're inviting two more adults into our relationship. And who knows if they are consenting? Because even back then, in the 80s, you still heard that there was sex slavery and things like this. So who knows if the people in these videos, maybe this is not what they want either. And so God just showed me I had come to a place where I needed to say no, and I had really never done that before in my marriage. I tried to do everything that my husband wanted, and when I would ask the Lord, why, he finally told me that it wasn't my husband who changed and who I was praying for him to change. He was exactly the same. But it was me. I knew right and wrong. I was the one that changed. And possibly he married me because I was so different. And now I wasn't. I was like him. And so God just said, you can't be blessed when you invite the devil to sit at your table. He can't. You can't invite him to come over and play and have a dinner, and get out, because he doesn't do it that way.
I mean, Ron probably felt threatened toward the end of your relationship.
Yes.
Because he could see how secure and how you were growing in the Lord, and how your spirit told you this is right, this is wrong. I don't care if you say that this is okay for married couples. It's not okay in the sight of God, that we're going to choose the right thing. And you had more secure footing and walking forward in truth. And anytime that you're walking forth in truth, God is right there beside you.
Yes.
And so what was the final breaking point, would you say, that finally you realized that, okay, I need to get out of this marriage?
Like I say, it was for 3 years that we continued to stay together. And God had finally, because originally I thought, oh, how can I ever love or trust him again? How? But I know the more I studied the Word, the more I talked to the Lord, he taught me about forgiveness, and that love is not just a feeling, and you can't let these things, these fears, which my pastor always said is false evidence appearing real, you cannot let them consume you. And you're going to have to set your mind on things above. I mean, the Lord just tells you everything to do. You set them on something different, and you set yourself on what is good and lovely and perfect. And you speak. As a wife, you then speak into those things. And so, like you said, he began to become even more different because obviously I did make him uncomfortable. And I finally, one day as I was putting, it had been 3 years, and I was putting laundry away, I found where he had rented an apartment. I found a lease that he had rented an apartment. And so when he came home very late that night, and he worked late, so it wasn't, you know, that wasn't unusual, but obviously he was doing something else later. And I just confronted him with it. And I said, you know, if you already have decided to go someplace and have a place to go, I think now is probably a good time to go there. And you need to move out, and we will discuss this. And now he left. Now, Grace, oh my gosh, as a woman who's going through this, I did crazy things. I tried following him. I wanted to know what was going on. I just went crazy, demeaned myself, and then eventually we got together to have a meal and talk. And he just told me I was the best thing that ever happened to him, and he would like to stay with me and take care of me and the kids. But he just wanted to see as many people as possible before he died. And I told him, well, then have fun. And when I walked out of the restaurant, I heard the Lord say, one of you has been married and the other has not. And that released me. It released me from my vow of not getting another divorce. I needed to be there because...
Well, God does allow for divorce in cases of marriages that have infidelity, and he knows how much that hurts. And you had given Ron many, many years, much more time to have a turnaround about face, but his actions and his speech obviously spoke for themselves. And God finally had you actually hear it from him that he wasn't going to change. And so that freed you to finally pursue a divorce, and so you can get settled and on your feet, and you weren't afraid of being single. You were probably like,
afraid, Grace.
Well, I know, but it was better than the alternative, staying in a marriage where, you were going to be emotionally abused and not spoken truth to. And so, but do you feel like you had already started forgiving Ron? Could you start seeing Ron perhaps maybe in the light that God was seeing Ron, because he was just a rebellious child who didn't know the Lord, who was insisting on living life the way he wanted to live. And so I know that you don't have any anger or resentment against Ron as of, today, and the Lord has been able to heal your broken heart over all those different affairs that he's had, while y'all were married. And so I mean, that is very sweet that the Lord was able to do that for you, Avara, because a lot of women, they won't ever forgive their husbands or their ex-husbands for that, what they did. And I mean, they have every right to be mad. But at the same time, that anger will turn into a core of bitterness, which will just eat away at you. And the offending party, they're fine. You're the one that's getting damaged from all the anger,
Well, I think that old saying, it's like you drinking poison, expecting the other person to die.
Yes.
And God was so good. He always put people in my life before a problem that I could look at and really evaluate. And I see what part of his problems were from was because his mom and dad had divorced. And she left. I mean, his dad left when he was only 10 years old. And so by the time Ron and I married, he had the most wonderful Christian woman. Oh my gosh. She just seemed to know the Lord so well and help people. But from the day I met her, her big thing was how bad his father had been to her. And she was that way every time I saw her until the day she died when she was in her 80s. She spoke about that. And the Lord showed me that was a poison to the children.
Right.
She was out telling this poison about their father, but yet helping people who needed help.
Right.
Sharing the love of Christ with them.
Right.
But I don't know that she shared it with her kids. And so that made me see, and God taught me through that no matter what happened between Ron and I, he was still the father there for the children. And so I married him for the good things. We divorced because of the bad. But, you know, it's so neat that the kids have his good parts and the bad is gone. I mean, it's just,
wonderful.
He's got our best of both parents.
Well, that's a testament to what God has done in your life, Avara, that you didn't continue that poison into the boys' life, because it does affect them. You know, you grow up in that environment where there's no respect between the spouses, and there's only bad that's, you know, spoken of with the other spouse. And so when you finally did leave Ron, you were single for a while?
I was single for 5 years.
And the Lord had Michael Mahler come across.
Well, not just come across. Oh, my gosh. You know, I guess I have to tell. He lived next door to me when I was married. And our 2 oldest children were the same age. And so I would talk to him only because my husband was very jealous. So I didn't talk to a lot of men. But I would have to talk to Michael because sometimes the boys wanted to spend the night together or do something together. And I had to be certain that they were going to be chaperoned. Somebody was going to be with them, whatever it was they were going to do. And then after Ron had left, my neighbors were just appalled and had sweet, sweet neighbors. And anyway, they thought they liked Michael because they felt like he was single and he needed to be married. And they loved me. And they thought I was just perfect. And so anyway, so Richard kind of I guess he put enough bug in both of our ears. And so that one day when I was outside mowing my yard, Michael came over and said, "Oh, I heard what's happened, and I'm so sorry," because he knew my ex. And I'm really sorry what happened. And then he invited me to dinner. Actually, I won't tell you. He invited me to sit in his hot tub, and I was like, no.
I'm sure you were not interested in getting into another relationship at all.
But anyway, he became a really sweet, sweet friend that eventually, and we then later dated for a while. And then we quit seeing each other because I just wasn't going to be married again. I didn't think I'd be married ever again, but particularly not to somebody who didn't want to love the Lord and grow in faith.
Right.
I just wasn't going to go there.
Well, Well, I mean, I know the rest of the
And
story.
you know the rest of the story.
But, that was the reason why you had broken off with Michael. God had already told you, Avara, I want you, if you are going to be with somebody, it's going to have to be somebody who is after my own heart. And Michael, spiritually at that point was more probably like an infant, I'm assuming. He grew up in the Catholic Church, and he, would go to Mass, I'm sure.
Right.
But he didn't really know the Bible.
No.
But while y'all were split apart, that is when my gosh, Michael, he's like a walking Bible encyclopedia now. And he loves the Lord, and you can just see it in his countenance. And, that growth he had while y'all were separated. And then you realize, oh my gosh, this is a different man that I'm beginning to see now. And Lord, maybe you do want this, relationship. Possibly.
That took another year and a half for me to see, because, I felt like, I've been fooled before.
Yes.
And I'm not going to be again. And, he just started going to church with me and
right.
Showing how different he was. And I finally began to listen to other people and friends who would say, oh, my gosh, he's such a wonderful man. If you don't want him, I do. And so,
that is so funny.
The singles are kind of that way.
Oh, you're like, okay.
But when he decided to ask me to marry him, he did go over and get permission from my mother. And of course, when he asked me to marry him, I said no. And I could not imagine being married again 3 times. Oh, my gosh. I just felt like I had an L on my forehead that meant loser. And then later God said, no, it means loved. So it's not loser.
No, that's good.
But my mother called me then after I'd been at market to see, she wanted to find out if anything had happened. And, of course, I didn't say anything. And then a couple of weeks go by, and she calls me again, and she goes, okay, did he ask you to marry him? And I was like, yes, how did you know? And she said, well, because he came and asked me. And she said, you've been married 2 other times, and you didn't ask me about the person. And I'm telling you now, you marry him for me if you don't marry him for you.
Oh, my gosh, Avara.
So that's how we got together. And she was such a wise woman, Grace.
Well, I am so glad you had your mother all through those years.
Oh, I did.
Oh, my gosh, what a huge blessing.
It was a blessing. And, and that's what, in those really, really hard times, it feels like your whole life is just a failure. I mean, everything about you here, I've loved the wrong person. I feel this bitterness, but I'm trying not to be bitter. But those are the stuff that God uses. God is building a testimony. This test in your life for, you say you're mine, but now that it's harder, you're going to act like mine. You accepted me, but then you didn't live for me. And are you going to do that? Because, I mean, we can just accept him and live fairly well. And I felt really good. And I'd have fought you to the death if you didn't think I was a believer. But now there is this God who wants to know us. And he wants to be our relationship. And he promises, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to show you the path you should take. I'm going to light up what you should do. I'm going to be your fortress when you're afraid. I'm going to provide for you when you see no opportunity of provision. Trust in me. And then the big thing about it, if you're a mom alone with kids, or even now, me as a mom, it is in my obedience that he tells me he's going to bless my children and care for them. And
that's a big responsibility.
What does a mom, a single mom, want?
Right. Right.
but somebody to care for her children.
Right.
But a lot of it's going to be based on, how am I living? What am I doing? What is my relationship like with him?
Right.
And
Right.
he's such a
He
good
wants
relationship.
us to pursue him in all things him, and not of things that we think we need or somebody else is telling us, especially if it's contrary to Scripture.
Right.
So staying in the Word of God, being in prayer, listening to him is so important. Sometimes we don't want to listen because we think, God, you don't know what you're doing. We know what we're doing, but that's not true. So, but no, I just think, and now you and Michael have been married for 28 years, and precious man, and
best father. Oh my gosh.
I'm telling
father
you,
to my sons.
So I mean, your story, Romans 8:28, and God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose.
Yes.
And even though your ex-husband never wanted to change, God knew his hardened heart.
Yes.
But God knew your softened heart, in that He was going to provide a way out and give you a better life story that He had planned for you, Avara, because it was not going to be possible where Ron was spiritually.
No.
And so as I was preparing for this, James, let me read this. James 1:2-4.
Oh, I
this
love
reminds
that.
me of
That.
you. This reminds me of you.
That marked.
Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Avara, that reminds me of you when I think of you. You are mature, you are complete, and you don't lack anything, And so I just thought it was a beautiful verse that describes what God has done in your life and what the hardships that you've been through, that in the end it was worth it. It made you into the woman that you are now. And I mean, and that's what the Lord wants. You know, He uses all of our brokenness and the ugliness and all of that to bring us to Him. Because honestly, there's nothing in this world, that's going to be any more important than who God is in our life.
Exactly.
And so I just love that you were so transparent about your story. I know it wasn't easy, but what would you like to say to women who are in difficult marriages? What would you like to tell them?
I guess the first thing that the Lord showed me was to seek Him. That this is not, I guess, first, go look up Hebrews 12 and read that, because it talks about enduring discipline. And this is how God trains us. God doesn't put the bad things in our life, but sometimes He allows them. And He allows them only for good to come out of them. So when you're there, keep your eyes on Him. Because as long as you've got your eyes on Him, keep your eyes in His Word, know Him, get in a Bible study. Surround yourself with some godly women that they have a good walk. They're not out partying. I had a few who wanted to take me to the bars when I got divorced, and it was like, no. And I went a couple of times, I'm sorry. But anyway, don't do that. Listen to God and seek Him and read Him. He will tell you everything you ever know. But then, just like that verse that you just read in James, under that, in verse 6, in verse 5, if any of you lack wisdom, which I know you're feeling like you lack wisdom right now, he should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to him. But when he asks, he must believe and not doubt, because he who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That man or woman should not think he will receive anything from the Lord. He's double-minded and unstable in all he does. And I remember when I read that, Grace, I knew that was me. Just like talking about praying, not hearing anything but my friend was hearing. I would pray, but I didn't always believe he could do it. And I had to get to that place that I believed. I knew this creator of the world is the God of the impossible. And if he wants my husband to love me, he will love me. There's no doubt. And I didn't want to be double-minded anymore.
Right.
So look for the Lord.
Yes.
He is good, and he is trustworthy.
Right. And he is there despite the circumstances of what is happening all around us. And so, well, thank you, Avara, for sharing your story with us today. And Avara's story is just a story of resilience, and her reliance on the Lord is so obvious. And as she just spoke, if you are in a very difficult marriage, no matter what the circumstances are, is keeping your eyes on Jesus, getting into the Word, being in prayer, spending time with Him, because that is when you're going to start hearing Him, and He's going to tell you what to do. And the power of prayer is tremendous. You know, like Avara said, get with some good, godly Christian women that you trust, who you can share your struggles with, who are going to be praying on your behalf, and they are going to be interceding for you. No doubt about it. There's always that one or two friends that He's going to provide for you. And never lose sight of Him, no matter if your marriage works out or not. You know, God still has you. You're still in His fold. And so, Avara, thank you so much for being on the show. And for those of you who want to get in touch with Avara, her email will be in the show notes. And so that is one way you can get a hold of her. So, but thank you, guests, for listening today for today's Getting Real to Heal with Dr. Grace. We will see you the next time. Bye now. Thank you to today's show sponsor, Express Employment Professionals. They are the leading staffing agency in East Texas, and they have helped thousands of businesses and companies find the right employees. If you are somebody that's looking for a job, Express Employment Professionals can also help you. Go to expresspros.com. That is expresspros.com. If you liked what you heard today and you want these Jesus stories to go out into the world, please consider giving to deepintheheartministries.com. You can also get a hold of me at grace@drgraceenglish.com.